Hello, my name is Matthew Hendricks, and this is my presentation on educating parents in youth sport. So we're going to start with some of the positives of parents being involved in youth sports. The first being support for the athletes. It's very important for an athlete to have a support system where they don't feel like somebody is either like against them all the time, or they're kind of like fighting their battles, or going through a bunch of stressful activities on their own. And parents can be a very good source for that, to be there for their child and athlete, and just kind of help out in a lot of ways. In my coaching journey, I've had a lot of very supportive parents. Their kids will be going through a tough time in like practice or something, and they'll go home and come back and have had that talk with their parents. They come back with kind of a different attitude, a lot better outlook on things. Another thing that is important and positive for parents to be involved in youth sports for their child is setting good examples. Maybe they were an athlete themselves in that sport. I've seen a lot of parents set not great examples, but I've seen a lot of parents set very good examples, especially, I played football for a bunch of years, and I've had like dads coaching me, and they've been, very positive role models, because not only they themselves played the sport, but, now they're able to teach that, and kind of like not just the way to play the sport, but the attitude, the way that, how to be respectful, things like that. A good thing to have as a parent in youth sports is, to be a source to go to with questions. Again, like I said, some parents, especially if they've played the sports before, their children or their athletes will have questions on, maybe like how to do something, or, why something is happening, maybe why like they're not, excelling at this, that, or the other thing. And parents can be there to, help answer that. Again, not necessarily coaching, but if they do know, they can be a good source for a athlete or child that could be confused. Also, probably the most important part is having a safe space, for the athlete, their child, to go that isn't sports. There's a lot of very stressful things that go on within, sports and stuff like that, where, it's physically demanding, very, mentally taxing. And at the end of the day, you don't want to be able to, the child to take home all of that and kind of like continue it at home. Right. So having parents, there to create a good and safe and nurturing environment for a child or a youth athlete to just, not be in the sport, is very important. Some of the negatives of having a parent, or being, that come from parenting in youth sports, can be, a few things. One being increased anxiety in athletes. I definitely remember one person that I coached who's would come to practice, and every time they messed up would just immediately kind of like lock up and be like, oh, I messed up this one time, I messed up every single time, like start stressing out super hard. And I know their parents had a lot to do with that kind of like, not necessarily self-esteem, but like the anxiety of, oh, if I try this thing and fail my first time, I'm not gonna succeed ever. And that's super negatively impactful on a lot of athletes, because especially if you're trying to get better and stuff, you're not gonna make it, you're not gonna do it the skill the first time. Sometimes maybe, but more often than not, you're gonna fail a lot, and that makes you a better athlete. But if you're so afraid to fail that you're not gonna do anything, then that takes away a lot from, an athlete's potential, what they want to do. And also like later in life, just in life in general, if a kid has anxiety, it's not going to be helpful for them, especially if it involves, even like failing at like maybe like a sport or maybe in school or something like that, like just small stuff, is not good. So that adding that anxiety, I've seen parents definitely, pressing, on kids, especially if they, want their kid to succeed, but they're not necessarily going about it in a way that, is healthy for their kid, right? That kind of leads to, added pressure to perform, for athletes, which is not like, kids want, like, if a kid wants to play a sport, that's awesome. But sometimes you'll have moments where I've had athletes where they go and they're playing that sport and they don't want to be there, and they don't want to be there, and they know they don't want to be there, but their parents keep like pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, being like, you have to do this, it's going to help you get into a good school, or it's going to help you do that, or like they played the sport and they loved it so much and they just want their kid to love it as much as they do, but they don't realize what they're doing is actually negatively impacting the kid, because they are just pushing it. And it goes with burnout as well. I think a lot of the times parents won't necessarily realize, because they're obviously bending over backwards, getting them to their practices on time, like doing that, all this and that. Sometimes they just don't realize that, like, that's not necessarily what their kid wants, and that's okay. But it's very important to realize, is my kid having a good time, or is this a safe environment? Is this a good environment for them? Am I, as a parent, helping or like taking away from, what was fun? Like when I was a kid, like being as a parent, like when they were a kid, like what did they like about the sport? Was it that their parent was super overbearing? Probably not, and that also, again, like goes into focusing on what the parent wants versus the athlete. There's a lot of parents out there that, played in high school, wanted to do all these things, maybe played in college, maybe wanted to go pro, but didn't, or like had something happen where they weren't able to do what they wanted to do. And I've seen a few times where like parents are just fully living through their kid and being like, all right, I couldn't do this because of, whatever circumstance, but like I as a parent somehow now have a second chance to do this because my kid is doing it. And that's not, a good mentality to have, at all. Because, at the end of the day, when your kid grows up, when the athlete grows up, goes off to college, goes off to like live their life, do whatever they want to do, end of the day, they're going to live their life. They're not going to do what you want them to do. And even if what they want to do aligns with what you want to do as a parent, cool. And, great. I'm glad that worked out for you. But a lot of the time, most of the time, kids probably not going to want to fully do what you want to do. And it's good, if they're not. And if they're in a sport that you don't know about, but you're excited that they're in it and you want them to succeed and all that, that all goes with, positive parenting. But again, there is that huge negative where it's, parents aren't realizing necessarily what they're doing, but it's definitely like more them pushing their child to do a sport rather than their child actively wanting to do it. And that takes a lot of fun out of, a lot of sports. You hear all the time, like up at the college level, athletes will get there and be like, oh, I'm so excited to play in college, and then burn out super hard because they don't realize like how demanding, how much that is on top of a bunch of stuff. And you don't want to put that on a child early on in life, because like, especially in high school, middle school, high school, like those should be the most fun times that you have playing sports. Like you ask most professional athletes, the most fun that they've had was in high school, because it's like, yeah, you're doing awesome and you're having a good time and all of your friends are there and it's like people that know you and it's great, but there's no huge pressure. Like you're not, if you get hurt, you're not now useless to a team that's, backed by money or something like that. And it's just like, it's a nice time. So I think parents should very much be involved, because being involved is super helpful in, again, giving a safe space and helping out with, a child's or an athlete's, sense of self. It helps them, kind of get through a lot of things, especially, there's hard times and everything. Sports are no different. But to push an athlete too far to like kind of have your own motives be a little bit overbearing is not kind of the way to do that. It's kind of just to try to nurture that environment. And so I think, at least from like a coach to athlete to parent perspective, there's a few ways in which I think personally could help reduce issues with parents. Whether it be, parent to coach, parent to athlete, athlete to coach, like, and then through a parent kind of thing. And the first one is, and I just started a head coaching position, and everybody, I've asked all my friends that I've head coached, all my friends' parents that I've head coached, and almost every single one of them, like by far just like pushed this rule as much like to me and made sure that I like was aware that it was a thing and that I should use it, if, I'm going to be coaching at any, at a high school, is the 24-hour after a game rule, where there is no contact between a coach or a parent, within 24 hours after a game. After that, if you want to talk about something there, like, that's fine, but it gives, a whole day to, let things sit. You're not seeing exactly what it was at the time that, a parent was mad at or something, or had a complaint about. There's a whole amount of time where they can talk with their kid, talk it out with their significant other if they need to, whatever, have time to cool off, sit, stand away from it, maybe realize, hey, it's high school, or hey, it's middle school. It's not, that deep. Like, it's not that big, just to cool off and just make sure that, if you are going to have that grievance or comment or something, to have that time to kind of like think about it. And, like, stepping away is a very like healthy tool, just to be able to like look back and be like, hey, did I need to like yell at this person for an hour and a half? Like, did I need to think about yelling at this person for an hour and a half today? Probably not. It's, a lot of the time, probably not the best idea. And especially if you have a cool head and you've taken a lot of time away from it, if it really is that, important, then clearly it should be talked about. But then there's after that 24 hours. With that being said, though, throughout the season and throughout whenever, I think it's super important to have an open path of communication between coaches, athletes, and parents. To be able to be like, for a coach to ask, maybe a parent, if they see an athlete struggling or maybe not having a good couple of days, to be like, hey, I'm just reaching out, making sure they're, everything's okay. From your perspective, like, I don't know what you're seeing at home, but this is what I'm seeing at practice. So if you want to address it or something like that, or, with a coach and an athlete, having that open communication where it's like, maybe things aren't going well outside of, the sport, but, as a coach, it's okay to talk about like certain things. Obviously there's like a limitation, like a hard limitation on like what should be talked about, what shouldn't, but being able to be open with, your players, or having your players be open with you, as far as, if, something's going on with them, or they, need a break on certain things because, certain circumstances come up. That's super important. And even as a coach, I feel like you should have some kind of open, because as a coach, as much as you want to be there and as exciting as it is to see your players succeed and organize practices and do all that stuff, there's definitely times when like life is just super draining. So if as a coach, you need to be able to communicate to not only the parents of your players, but your players, to be like, hey, like, you're a person too, as much as it is important for you to have that kind of like, oh, I'm your coach. You should do what I say because I'm trying to help you, kind of thing. So if you're sick or, you're having like issues, like family issues or something like deep that you need to like attend to, it's kind of important to not necessarily have to talk about it, but just be open and be like, hey, I might not be at practice today. I've been really sick, or I am going to have, the assistant coach run the practice because I have like a family emergency or something like that. So that, nobody's like not showing up or like doing something out of the blue that nobody was ready for. So open communication is very important. And then encouraging a permissive atmosphere with families, being it, more player focused, but not like that's all, that's going on. Like everything is just super focused on that one player, obviously families, right? You have whatever family situation there is, but it's a family situation, like especially, up to the high school level when, people aren't like the athletes aren't on their own on top of, being an athlete. Having, again, a safe space where it's not just that sport, but, if that's what if a player really wants to like do that and keep pursuing it, it's, it behooves the family of that athlete or multiple athletes to assist in ways that don't benefit just the parents, but like mostly benefit the athlete, kind of thing. And if that, if it benefits the parents as well, cool, but mostly it should be, fostering a safe, nurturing environment for the athlete to do what they want to do and succeed at whatever level it is that they want to succeed at. And then again, like I said before, setting boundaries, obviously there's certain things that can and cannot be said, should or shouldn't be said, when within, a coaching to player relationship, parent coaching relationship, and establishing those boundaries early on as opposed to, partway through the season. Because it's very difficult to not have had a rule, even like, not even just in sports, but like in working and anything, like, especially when you're new to something, when you go into an area and there's a certain set of rules and that's what everybody's doing and that's what everybody's been doing. And then like your manager, your boss, or your coach tries to implement something like halfway through the season, like half the people are going to like do it. And the other half of the people are going to be like, why are we doing this, midway through? So it's super important to, establish, obviously that 24-hour rule, any like thing that you have with parents where, you can talk, like you don't want to talk about certain things you do, or you do want to talk about certain things, like to the extent of what, is okay. Contact with like parents and players, like during games, things like that. And then, contact, like, and then also establishing things with players, like, if you like mouth off, are you just let it slide like the first time, or are you just going to be like, all right, something happens, immediate punishment, like that kind of stuff. It's very important to like get on that and continue that very early on. Otherwise, if you let it run away, it's hard to bring it back. And if you try to bring in a new rule that's, less fun, let's say, than the other rules, that's also very difficult. So that kind of stuff. And then also like things like, especially if you're a coach at a school or something like that, like social media, there's a bunch of that kind of stuff, that's going around. I know my school that I coached at had a few like issues with some of their coaches. So like establishing like, hey, like while I'm your coach until whenever, like no social media things, like you can't add me on anything, like privating everything. That's also very important. Even for parents, like I personally wouldn't let a parent follow me on any social media. Just because like, again, there's that boundary. You want, I'm a coach of your kid. Outside of that, I don't like, it's not appropriate for me to know you in any other capacity. Maybe if, you know, like I'm friends with that. I've been friends with that person and I happen to know their kid and now I'm coaching their kid. Like that's different. But it's like, if I didn't know you going into it, like I'm not going to like go get a drink with you. I'm not going to like go hang out. I'm not going to like do anything that would put me in a position that could, you know, potentially be, bad for like me, the athlete, the parent, or the school. So setting hard boundaries is super important. And just kind of to sum everything up, you know, it's important for parents to be involved in youth sports, but not necessarily to be overbearing and the driving force behind why an athlete is in youth sports. And as a coach, you should kind of not necessarily, you know, obviously there's a lot of other things, but, you know, fostering that and being able to inform and help kind of make that aspect of the sport, you know, kind of continue through and be like touched upon is very important. And yeah, thank you.